Homeschoolers at Excellence in Education on November 19th. Let's go ahead and share the screen. Okay, we've got lots of stuff, interesting things handed in. Again, I ask you please to hand them in before Wednesday, just so that I get a chance to give them due time, and also so that you get an opportunity to see the corrections before we go through them in class. But I know how it works. One does things at the last minute. All I'm asking you to do is redefine your last minute slightly. Okay, let's take a look at what we've got here. Oh, I've got other things lined up there. All right, I just got to remember those. Okay, here's our agenda. I believe that Azariah is following along remotely here. Now, I just wanted to finish up the inexplicable universe. We've essentially disposed of it, I believe. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that one? Everybody did finish watching it. Okay. Any concluding insights, responses?
I really liked it. I thought there's a lot of good points to be noted, and he's a great speaker.
He does a good job. He does an adequate job. I'm sorry to say that. He does a better job than many, but he's far from the best, as you will see from some of the things you watched this week. There are others whose oratory is on a significantly higher level, but for an unscripted American academic, he does a good job. Okay, he brings up some really interesting points. One of the ones that I mentioned before is our inability, perhaps, our lack of qualifications for defining the word intelligence is perhaps an important one to realize. The way he describes the fact that we can't communicate with other life forms to which we are so closely related and on any reasonable level. What makes us think that we can judge what an intelligence is if it were a different kind of intelligence than that which we possess? And I think that's one which, when we look down here at this lecture, that everybody seems to miss. They say, either there is or there isn't an intelligence. No, I'm sorry. If you don't know what intelligence is, you can't ask that kind of question. Anyway, just a thought. Okay, let's examine submitted assignments. We can jump into that one. Let's do. And then we'll come back to the rest of this. I really like the way you jumped into this one. That is a great way to demonstrate misleading your audience.
Yeah.
And of course, if you saw something, 10 simple tricks to get straight A's, you would be intrigued and likely to want to turn the page and see. And then it says, okay, put in your email address here and fill out this form and so forth. Mm-hmm. I think I have a solution to that in a way. Data pollution. It should be possible to have a little app that automatically fills in forms for you, putting in spurious information, attributing things to other people, and putting congressmen on vast mailing lists, for example, just to demonstrate that what you see online and the data that are collected are really not to be trusted at all.
Yeah.
And so this universal surveillance concept sort of sags a little bit around the edges when you realize that it's perfectly possible that a large percentage, some unknown percentage of what's out there is entirely erroneous. Okay, nicely done. Oh, I'm sorry. This is somebody else's. Where did we? Ah, here we are. The straight A's one. There we go. Yeah, we'll do that one next week when Azariah is here, but I haven't finished doing it yet. Okay, try to get projects in before Wednesday, and watch for run-on sentences, repetition, and always read your work aloud. I want to demonstrate as we go through here how there's so many things in here which, if read aloud, you wouldn't have let pass yourself. You see what I mean? Okay, first of all, you come up with this, hi, welcome to the 7 best ways to get straight A's in all of your classes. I felt here putting it in quotes made it a little more, a little clearer that indeed this isn't what you're saying, but this is something that you're demonstrating.
Okay.
Okay. This would have been well, let's read it and see. It's just one of the many advertisements that now bombard. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have caught that. That S doesn't belong. Because the advertisements that bombard is what we're really talking about. This is one of them, but it's the plural that we have to fit to this verb. Every day, whether it be on the internet or on the streets. I like your use of the subjunctive here. I'd like to talk more about the subjunctive. Was that in one of those chapters? I think it's actually a later chapter than the ones I've assigned you. We'll hit that. Advertisements have now become the norm in modern life. This, however, now, if you had put the however over here, however this, that would have been all right, because however is a conjunction and would allow you to put 2 separate sentences together. But when you start with the subject of the sentence, this, however, then we have 2 separate sentences without, the way you did it, without anything in between, and that's a run-on. Do you understand the difference there?
Yeah.
Okay, and can become a serious problem, especially when, really seem to deserve a comma there, when the advertiser manipulated the audience. I think putting it in perfect tense here works better. The audience has, the advertiser has manipulated the audience. Nowadays, it's a single word. Okay. This has become an annoyance, and in some cases it can even, and here you didn't have a verb at all.
Oh, I think that was just a typo or I deleted it or something.
Yeah, well, here, that's why reading it through, you'd immediately find that. But rather than it can even be a difference, let's find a verb that really fits. And so be can fit anywhere, but it can pose a danger rather than be a danger. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So find a good word if you can. What's business? I don't know what you were thinking that word was, but I think it meant it began. To gain an online presence. Many of them, strictly speaking, this is a synthesis error, because we're talking about business here in the singular as a mass noun, and then we're referring to it in the plural, and that's the definition of a synthesis error. Okay, let's go on here. We've got another run-on. In many ways, they were correct and their sales went up. Unfortunately, many people found that these 2 sentences were just fused together, so we have to separate those. Or there's so many other ways you can fix them. You can put in because or due to or anything that connects the 2 and makes one of them into a subordinate clause. Then you're perfectly okay. Let's see. Those ads could be used for malicious intent. The ads may have been posted with malicious intent, but they're being used for malicious purposes. You see the difference between intent and purpose? Okay. Isn't it wrong? Again, I just don't like the constant use of people. It lowers lowers the level of things. Let's in this case, I looked at that initially and thought that, okay, we're talking about the populace looking at ads. Oh no, you're not talking about the populace looking at ads. You're talking about those who are putting viruses in. So instead of calling them people, I call them miscreants.
Okay.
Okay, the word myriad is used in a very specific way, and it's an exception to the rule that every single noun requires an article in English. There are a number of exceptions to that, but myriad is certainly one of them. Many of these viruses would even collect the information stored on one's computer. Let's see. I think we have to get rid of the and, with which there were then myriad things that attackers could do. Okay. So myriad things, it's actually a collocation that's very useful. Sounds nice when you get it right. And you don't have to say myriads of things, just simply myriad things, which means many and of varying sorts.
Okay.
Okay. In fact, it almost looks, if you say something looks like the public can't, we can raise the level quite a bit by saying it seems as though the public can't. Does that make sense? Like works fine when you're comparing something to something else, like an adjective. This one is like that one. But if you do it the same way somebody else does it, that's a little different. I do it as though I were he doing it. You see what I mean? Okay, this in itself is not bad. Itself would have to be a single word there, but otherwise that's acceptable. It's just we can raise the level a little bit by saying this is in itself not bad, because technically it just flows off the tongue a little better now.
Okay.
I think that was just a typo. Fellings rather than failings. By doing this, okay, I've suggested the word subliminal just because that's a word to describe that kind of advertising, that kind of effect upon one's audience. This in fact is, just sounded better. This is quite noticeable when you go and look at. Now, as soon as you say you go and, when you go and look at, it lowers the tone, it brings it down. But if you were to say, this is quite noticeable when one goes and looks at old advertisements. Okay, this seems to be an especially large, this is interesting, you're using the word large as a noun here. This is a great big large over here. You see what I mean? So that doesn't really work, but I suggest this seems to be particularly prevalent when it comes to clothing. And I got tired of it seems because that popped up a number of times. There are other ways to say the same thing. Apparently, for example. Okay. And the last one here comes to children as they are very easily influenced and are thus easy targets for advertisements. Sounded best. The way you said it, are very easily influenced, thus they are easy targets for advertisement. I think just a marginal improvement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. Brian. Now, Brian handed in something weird and wonderful here. A couple of things I would suggest. You can sort of tell by the way you write that you're doing it on a phone with limited lines. And perhaps you'll have to try to compensate for that a little bit and make your paragraphs a little bit longer, and perhaps put a line in between the paragraphs would help just to make it easy. Easier to read and easier to understand what you're working with. Also, the rule is you want to have an introductory paragraph and then substantiating paragraphs and then a concluding paragraph. And those introduction and conclusion are useful. But I look at this and I realize that you've got a feel for language, the love for words, which is in there, and it's important, far more important than mechanics are. But it's got all kinds of mechanical problems, which, if fixed, give it so much more impact on the audience, especially an educated audience. So let's just look at those a bit. Yeah, this is definitely a rant. It works nice as a rant. My suggestion here is to flesh it out and do another version with your introduction and end. Okay. Here are some impressive images. There are some impressive images and expressive devices here whose use is wonderful to see. The prose strays from that of a polished formal English, and this needs refinement. Let's go on and look at that. Introductory and concluding paragraphs. These are just little specific things here. The word media is the plural of medium. And I was just listening to one of the things I assigned you today. I tried to go through and listen to all of that, and I ran out of time. I didn't get a chance to look at all of the one you posted, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, but I saw most of it. So, but I noticed that somebody in there used medium correctly, which is important. Medium is the singular, media is plural. And just keep that in mind. Notice that it's very frequently misused, but if you use it correctly, it distinguishes you from other writers, particularly in the eyes of an educated reader. Every day is an adjective. If you're doing something every day, then every day should appear like that. So this is an everyday book, but I read it every day. Don't create an ad hoc noun out of a verb when the perfectly good one exists. So if you are we're talking about the verb retain, retainment doesn't really even exist. Retention is the verb, is the noun. And this is just a general rule. Whenever there really is a good noun there, let's not whack an ad hoc thing together. You understand the word ad hoc, right?
Ad hoc?
Go ahead.
I've heard it before.
Okay. Yeah, ad hoc means created specifically for this particular situation, made up on the spur of the moment, if you'd like. In most cases, it's best to avoid saying person. Always read your work aloud. Okay. I should just sort of have a stamp or something. Read your work aloud, so you know. Okay. Spongious encephalon. Oh, what a wonderful way to start something, but you do have to spell it right. Otherwise, nobody can look it up. Okay. So we're talking about the spongious nature of the brain. Often compared by most, the human brain is very similar to a sponge. I'm not sure whether by most is the best way there. Often compared is probably adequate. And so it absorbs and retains information absorbs and retains information obtained through, well, we don't gain a lot of information from birth, from the act of birth, from the instant of birth. Let's make that infancy. It seems to work a little bit better. Okay, we learn all of these things. The media are quite parasitic, and of course here we're using media correctly and it's plural. And if we're talking then about a single medium, use the word medium, considering that their sole purpose, and again I'm using it consistently in the plural, is to feed off the host. And indeed, they are in their sense parasitic, is what you're saying, which is more often than not the most popular and new clothes, brands, appliances, gadgets, movies, shows, and people. What the brain absorbs, this is a nice list, nice coordinated list. That's what is called a coordination. Mm-hmm. And you used it correctly here. I should have pointed out that that's an Oxford comma, which nowadays is generally avoided, but it depends on the publisher's policies. Note, however, that the use of this "and" at the end, or an "or" at the end, is not universal. It's acceptable, and it can be used for emphasis to say something like clothes and brands and appliances and gadgets. It's not usually done, that's not the norm, but for emphasis you might decide to do it, or leave it out altogether and just use commas and not even put an "and" in there afterwards. And in fact, these are used so frequently they have names. There is now, let me see if I can think of what they are. I'll pull it up. We have a large collection of rhetorical devices, and rhetorical devices are very useful to know, but it's not necessary to have the whole list in your head and know what all the names of them are. But this is one of the rhetorical devices, the use of the "and" in more than one place, or the absence of the "and" altogether. And the former is polysyndeton, and the latter is asyndeton. Those are the names of the rhetorical devices. The poem by Masefield. Ivory and apes and peacocks, sandalwood, cedarwood, and sweet white wine. He uses that extra "and" in there, partly because it helps his scansion in the line, but also because it helps the emphasis, the polysyndeton as he's using it. Okay, every day again. Okay, new commercials. Even going to such an extent as to. That's just awkward and fumbling, if you see what I mean. If I change it to going to the extent of raising the volume, does that sound better in your ear?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what rule is being applied there. It's just, that's why you need to hear language used well and learn to emulate it, because you can't figure out a rule for everything. Okay, and here we've got retainment. Now, even if the dictionary tells you that's a word, retention is a vastly better one. In the audience's encephalon. Once retained, by the way, it's obvious that if one reads your vocabulary listing, this will all make a great deal more sense, as most of you have probably discovered. This product, because it's aided the recipient of it. One, brainwashing, often brainwashing to keep it in the back of one's head. Now, the original here was often brainwashing one's brain to keep it in the back of their head. This is a major synesis error. This is what we were talking about earlier. Brainwashing one to keep it in the back of their head. One is singular, there is plural. So I felt it worked better here. One, to keep it in the back of one's head is still not good. There may well be a way to improve upon that. But I love this. I think this is wonderful. So it lingers and festers. Okay, that's a wonderful image. It's something that really pops through the mind. Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. That's Tennyson. Lingers and festers. I love that concept of lingering and festering. Wonderful. I suggested infuses or permeates. What does infuse mean?
Well, fuse means to combine, to It's like become a part of.
Yeah.
But infuse.
It can sort of, but an infusion would be something like tea,
That's
in which
exactly what I
you
was thinking.
put your tea in and
Oh.
it disperses its flavoring throughout. And permeate, of course, that would be to perhaps through capillary action find its way through some sort of substance. Okay. Disseminate, not another nice word for that. Just suggestions here. What you have there is so nice as well. Actually, disseminate, I skipped a line here, so it's down below here, but disseminate could have worked out there as well. Okay, surpass these brainwashing advertisements with Attic salt. That's a weird one, but it's absolutely what you meant, and so that's perfect. I appreciate seeing new and weird usages like that. Further preventing pesky brainwashing tactics. Pesky. You've used the word pesky before, and it can be the right word. My suggestion to you is go to your thesaurus and have a collection of pesky alternatives so that you can use those. Brainwashing tactics. Executed? Executed is not quite the right word. I suggested introduced, inflicted, disseminated by the media to overcome and prevent from evolving. We've got to have something in there. So prevent one from evolving into the zombie-like audience. That is sadly the majority of the masses. If I simply put in a dash is a wonderful what's the word I'm looking at? Punctuation device. It's sort of a positive. It allows you to expand upon what was just said before. And so use dashes if it sounds comfortable for you. Sadly, the majority of the masses, in this case, I'm using it to introduce a subordinate clause. There's no verb in there at all. Sadly, the majority of the masses, indeed, zombie-like audience is a good way probably of describing the majority of the masses. Okay, and then here we've got a little bit of second person at the end, but don't let materialistic products entice you. If indeed this is a lecture to someone in specific, then maybe it makes sense to do that. But generally, instructions are better off avoiding that. Any questions on this? Okay, I'd like to go back and look at your vocabulary list too, because we had some good things going on there. Okay, I think that's the end of the projects that were handed in, with the exception of the one that we're saving for next week here. Let me go back to
Next week or 2 weeks?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. From now on, whenever I say the word next week, today, I mean 2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This little bit of vocabulary. I can look down this, of course, and see that you've got some sort of a list you're taking these from, because they're all starting with A. And so that I can understand and appreciate, but on the other hand, it's better if you take words out from a context. And indeed, I'm sure that plenty of the stuff that I've given you has words in them that are worthwhile. That way, you know that it's been used at least once somewhere. Mm-hmm. And some of these, I suspect you'll probably never see again. And so it may not be the most useful thing in the world to understand what an abaya is, a sleeveless outer garment worn by Arabs. Doesn't come up every day. Or the fourth stomach of a ruminant, such as a cow or sheep. These are fine words to know if you're going to be a veterinarian or something, but words that can be applied to anything are far more useful. Albertopolis, oh, that's fine if you live in London and you want to refer to that area south of Kensington Gardens. And indeed, Royal Albert Hall is the great auditorium theater there. But where does that come from? Polis means city in Greek. And so this is the Albert City, the number of museums and so forth there. Spanish palace or fortress. And of course, you've heard the word Alhambra because we have a city right nearby here called Alhambra, which is named after a fortress in Spain, which has been the inspiration for a number of things, including some beautiful pieces of music. Amphibology. This is worth it. This one was worth the entire list. I realize you just came across it in alphabetical order and hit the thing, but this is a word that is intensely useful, certainly to me. Amphibology, amphibological. This, of course, a phrase or sentence is grammatically ambiguous. This, indeed, is the example of that kind of ambiguity that I use in the textbook. Little old men in compact cars wearing hats. Who's wearing the hat? And it's an ambiguity that arises not from ambiguity of word meanings, but from an ambiguity of sentence construction. And a very important one to understand. So that's worth a project. Okay, nice words. Again, see if you can mix them up from their sources, but that's very good. Okay, let's go back to our agenda here. We've got other things. Before I start imposing further parts of my agenda upon you, I'm going to ask you folks if there's anything particular that's on the top of your head that you would like to treat and dispose of or prolong.
Has anybody seen the post that I put up on the
I haven't
Oh,
watched
which one is
the
this?
one thing that I didn't
the
watch.
gifted hands one?
I'm sorry?
The gifted hands with Ben Carson.
Yes, did anybody watch that one?
I haven't yet.
Yeah, that is one
Yeah,
I did not
yeah, I haven't watched that.
It's good. I didn't get a chance to see everything, but I skipped around, and it's a very nice film. It's not one that I would assign simply because there's so much dialect in it. And I don't want to disparage other dialects. They're perfectly wonderful in their own ways and often very expressive, and they often have great literature in them, but they're not the dialect we're using in here.
It's mostly informative. That's how I found out who Ben Carson was.
But it's a very nice film, and I think it's really an uplifting film, sort of a what's the word I'm looking for? I will find it eventually. I recommend it. I think it's a nice film to watch if you get an opportunity, but just note that the language is not all going to be recommended. Okay. And it is up here. I will leave it in the assignments. Redemptive, I think, is probably the best word to describe what I was trying to say about that film. Okay. Assignment, vocabulary journals, we've done those. First 5 chapters in the book. We can go over these very quickly if there are no questions. I just want to make sure that everybody understands what they are. We've gone through the first 3 chapters already. Chapter 4, the bear and the big cheese. You've all read that. You all understand wonderful words like fester and verisimilitude and deprecation and pendulous. None of these are mysterious to anybody anymore, right? Okay, and okay, this is the chapter that has the commonly confused verb pairs, lie and lay. And we have some some quizzes in here to test those. Uh, have you all read that part about the lie and lay and understand that?
Yes. I can post that.
Very good. Because
Right.
so many people get it wrong.
Uh-huh.
So many English teachers get it wrong. Almost every doctor I've ever come across gets it wrong when they tell you to lay down on the table.
Mhm.
Uh, okay. So as long as you folks understand that, I'm not going to belabor it and do anything else with it. But perhaps it's important also to know that lie and lay is just one example of a number of different verbs that work the same way. And it's very predictable. Lie is an irregular verb, and it's intransitive. Lay is a regular verb, sort of, and it's transitive. And they all work that way. What does intransitive mean? Transitive means it takes an object. You lay something on the table. You don't lie something on the table, you lie on the table. Okay, so transitive means it takes an object.
Mhm.
Okay, what does irregular mean?
Unusual. Something you don't see very
But when
often.
it comes to a verb, what does it mean?
Not commonly used there in that place.
Well, not necessarily. It means that its past tense is not created according to the normal set of rules.
Mm.
The past tense of lie is not lied. Well, I shouldn't say that, because if you tell a lie, yes. But if you lie down today, yesterday you lay down, and you have lain down. It's an irregular verb, so it's conjugation is irregular. With lie and lay, it's a little peculiar, but the other ones, rise and raise, sit and set, fall and fell, they all do exactly the same thing, and in all cases, it's the same thing. The irregular one is intransitive, the regular one is transitive.
How come if you were to say to a person, would you please lay here or lay down? They wouldn't catch the error. But if you were to say to somebody, would you please sat down? They'll catch it
That's a very
immediately.
interesting
Why is
point. Well, that's an apples and oranges thing, because you can't ask them, will you please sat down, because that's the past tense.
So
and you can't use it that way.
lay.
But if I were to say, would you please set down, that would be apples and apples. And so, do you think people would object peculiarly to that? Would you please set down? Sounds bad to me.
Mhm.
But indeed, that's the problem. If you say, will you please lay down, will you please set down, those are both exactly as erroneous as each other. They both break the same rule. But you're right. Very often you can figure out what is right by making that kind of comparison. Okay. Go ahead and do the lie-lay play sheet if you have any questions about it. And you can go on to the Billy Goat's Gruff, which is,
Sequel.
there are some important aspects here in the Billy Goat's Gruff that I just wanted to demonstrate to you. One of the points that we've talked about sentence fragments and run-on sentences a little bit, and you pretty much knows what those are, right? If you put a sentence fragments, whether he goes there every day, that's not a sentence, is it? I can make it into one by saying, I don't know whether he goes there every day, but it's a sentence fragment. And we're not allowed to have a sentence that has more than one complete sentence in it, unless you set it apart with a semicolon or a conjunction or something like that. But those sentence fragments or dependent clauses are the building blocks of good sentences. Make a sentence that it can have dozens of them. And I wasn't thinking about this when I started when I wrote the original vocabulary story there, let's see, where is it here? Yeah, here it is on page 80. The sentence, and it's an entirely one single sentence that goes, having determined that the troll did not in fact eat billy goats, that it was a strict herbivore, and that its reclusive misanthropic behavior was due to a very painful ingrown toenail, the antagonists set aside their rancor and came to an amicable agreement, which in turn developed into reconciliation and benevolent camaraderie as the four discussed politics, religion, and the relative integrity of straw, sticks, bricks, and gingerbread as construction material. That's one sentence. All of those are perfectly acceptable dependent clauses linked together. However, turns out that you could have looked at that as 10 separate sentences. If it had said, the antagonists determined that the troll did not eat billy goats, period. They learnt that it was a strict herbivore. They found that its behavior was due to an ingrown toenail. You see what I mean? You could split that one sentence into 10 separate individual sentences, and it ends up being choppy and hard to read and uncomfortable. It's much nicer to have the kind of sentence that it was to begin with. And so at the end of this this chapter, I have a project here which I'd like to suggest to you. Construct 5 sentences, each containing at least 3 anachronisms. What's an anachronism?
Where's this the project?
I'm on page 83.
Okay.
Okay, what's an anachronism? Anybody?
Don't know.
I should know.
Okay, I'm sorry. Something that's out of place in time.
Hmm.
So I'll give you an example of an anachronism here, or it's actually several. The centurion ruthlessly gobbled up all the green skittles before stepping into the transporter amid thunderous applause from the Cossacks, whose gaudy socks clashed dreadfully with their fur-lined skateboards and intricately embroidered sneakers depicting mammoth and mastodon migrations. Things that don't fit in time. And of course, that was the intent, was to demonstrate how easy it is to put something together that doesn't fit in time. And so the purpose of this is to use anachronisms as a source of inspiration for putting together more complex sentences that use multiple dependent clauses. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and do it if you're so inspired, or at least I hope it inspires you to think about that. Okay, any questions at all about chapters 1 through 5? If I gave you a quiz on those, you'd all just pass with flying colors, right?
No, necessarily. I'll have to do a little bit of prep, of
Yes.
course.
Okay. We have just discovered, we have just discussed the first 5 chapters in the textbook. Okay, judge your teacher. This is just a funny little thing, and it goes together with the student as teacher, which I gave you last week and asked you to read. How many of you actually read that?
I actually forgot to look at that.
You didn't see it? Okay. Brian, what did you think?
It was a bit confusing, but I thought it was interesting. I mean, I was a little bit confused.
Okay, well, what fundamental assumptions are being attacked, or at least questioned in this one? One of the things that one encounters consistently is the authority of the teacher being more important than the learning process. And that you find in so many places, and understandably in a way. but it's contradictory. It often is not compatible with learning as fast as possible.
Mhm.
And the contention, what is the contention here? The tradition, the assumption that is always made in any kind of a learning environment is that you've got one person who is the teacher and then some number of people who are the students.
Mhm.
And that person who is teaching not only is an expert at the subject matter, but also an expert in how each student is going to learn it best. And believe me, there are some teachers absolutely brilliant in the subject matter who haven't the foggiest notion how you're going to be able to learn it best.
Mhm.
And so it's a false assumption there altogether. You need to have the expertise in some fields, especially if you're learning how to dance or play a musical instrument or do a martial art or something like that. You need to have the experience seeing an expert do it. But so often people who have gained that expertise have no pedagogic potential at all. And they're put in the role of being a teacher with no concept of how to impart that knowledge. However, if you as a student, and this is an interesting one, if you as a student have learned how you work and how you learn, you could be your teacher. From time to time, you may need to seek out an expert in the field. And especially if you're trying to learn a foreign language, you need a native speaker. But that native speaker doesn't have to be the teacher.
Mhm.
You see what I mean?
Mhm.
Anyway, that's the contention here. And I believe it's true from personal experience. You can certainly find so many examples of that, and indeed so many examples of teachers and classes that don't work.
Was that assignment like 2 weeks old or something?
That one was 2 weeks old. I
Okay.
posted that one together with the article by what's her name in the academic journal.
Yeah, I remember reading it now.
Yeah.
I just didn't recall.
Okay, now pursuant to that, however, I added this. Maybe it's in here somewhere. Maybe I didn't put it up there. Okay, the judge or teacher one. Now this is a bit subversive, I suppose, but in general, these are things that students are not expected to do in class. Yet I think if you ever find yourself in a class, one of the first things you should really do is learn something about your teacher.
Mhm.
If that teacher has published anything, read it. It'll give you a lot of insight into the perspective that teacher is going to have on things. And let's see, I'm talking here again about the non-traditional models, but ask yourself, does the teacher demonstrate competence in the subject matter? Now, in some cases, I've had so many teachers who would just sit in front of the class and read to us. And then some of them, I've seen this really in classes, the teacher fills the chalkboard full of stuff and then asks everybody, okay, write it down, and leaves. What kind of teaching is this? I mean, all you're doing is you're a copyist. Okay, and indeed, one of the problems here is a lot of teachers teach straight from the book, and they don't know what's going to come after that. They don't want to diverge from anything that's on their agenda, and that's limiting. But give them a chance. Give them a chance to try to catch up and figure out what's going on. But be aware of the fact that there are significant limitations. If you come across a teacher whose knowledge is so encyclopedic that you don't have to stay within the book at all, you can go off in any direction, this is a teacher worth following. It's worth looking at that teacher's offerings in the catalog and saying, okay, I'm going to take that one, and that one. You see what I mean? These teachers may not be easy teachers, quote, quote, but that's where you're going to learn something. Does the teacher answer questions not covered in the text? Does the teacher answer questions covered in the text and not covered in the text? Does the teacher research the answer to a question if he or she did not know the answer? That's an important one, and that one does come up. I think I told you about it last week when I asked about the cycloid, and the teacher came in the next period with this nice little program for me, showing me how to map a cycloid. Does he research the answer to the question? Doesn't know. Dispense with the text altogether when other subjects arise. Allows students to refer to other academic source material not used in the text. Allows students to pursue a different line of inquiry than that presented in the text. Venture into unscripted territory and cater to different learning styles. This is sort of a spectrum, but their questions were worth asking when you're in class. And here's really the dreadful ones, and I've seen this so many times. Does the teacher ever say, "Who's the teacher here?" Or read only the pages assigned, or don't think, do as you're told. I've even seen that on signs on the teacher's office wall.
Oh, wow.
If you find yourself in a situation like that, you may have to get through the class. Then you've got to figure out what the best way to do it is. But you also have to realize that you're in an environment in which your goal is to get the grade, and the teacher's goal is to put obstacles in your way, and with education having little or no consideration. And so I'm sure you've all read the rest of this, and if you haven't, you probably should. But I think also when you get to college, one of the most important things, you probably heard this before, but most kids don't do it. One of the most important things you can do is read the catalog. The catalog is the contract. It defines the responsibilities of the college, and it defines what the requirements are for you to get your degree.
Oh, excuse me.
Sure.
I just have to drop something in that people.
Please.
You said it's contract.
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct legally. And our daughter saved herself an entire semester in college because we kept her original course catalog, which outlined what she was supposed to do to get a degree in aviation. Because between her junior and senior year, they changed the requirements. And then when she was a semester away from graduating, they told her that she didn't have enough credits because the new requirements were da 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 da. And she whipped out the old catalog from her entrance, which is her contract. And because she had that and she could show it to them, no, this is what I signed up for. This. I've done all of it. You have to graduate me. And they did.
Yeah, and you may actually have to take it to court. But,
Yeah, she didn't have to do that.
Right.
But people don't realize that your original,
Right, it's
Course
the year
catalog
when you
is
entered the
contract.
college, and that's that
Yeah.
edition of the catalog. Thank you. This is a hard thing to ask kids to do, though. And so instead, they sent them to a counselor. Don't trust the counselors. There's a good chance they may know what they're talking about. There's a chance even that they might have your best interests in mind, but you can't count on it. Read it yourself. Or get parents to help you with it. Okay, let's see, where are we here? All right, let me finish there. We've got so much, and we've got some time left. Good. We've got 12th Night. Have you all watched 12th Night?
Oh, the play?
Yes.
I watched one of them.
Okay, excellent. I didn't expect you necessarily to watch them all. The third one didn't work, it turned out. It's a broken link, so I'll fix that sometime. I'm not even sure which one that was, but Indeed, Twelfth Night is a wonderful play. I think probably one of the easiest and best to start jumping into Shakespeare with. So let's take a look at that. But let's very quickly cover the rest of things and then delve into Twelfth Night. Ethos. This, I have it queued up to the middle, so it starts right in the middle of the thing.
Mhm.
And it talks specifically about the son of Sigmund Freud. It doesn't, well, it tells you that, but it's before the part where I start the video, who apparently had a great deal of influence in this country into the advertising process, and indeed how to sell an image rather than sell a product, sell a concept rather than sell
Steve
a
Jobs
device.
did a good job with that.
It's an interesting point. Steve Jobs, of course, was more of a visionary. I think he came up with ideas that were worth selling. Anyway, did anybody have any thoughts about this one here?
I thought it was a really cool video, and it showed also how closely the government is actually working with the media and advertisements and all this, and how they're trying to get a certain mindset into people's mind, and kind of throwing in the subliminal messages thing
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And I thought it was a really interesting look and take at media and advertisements and large companies.
Where do you put education in that equation?
That's true. It's not really
it's
there.
a big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, or at
No.
least just traditional education is part of the indoctrination process, isn't it? It's not really a terribly organized part, but it's definitely one way to keep kids from getting an education on their own,
Oh yeah.
which is the way it was put by, I can't remember his name, of the founders of the Princeton Review, that not only does public education provide you with a dismally poor education, it prevents you from getting one of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have so many ways in which the populace is dumbed down, and you're confined to what you're supposed to think, what you're expected to think, and so forth. It's always worthwhile to stand back a little bit and say, okay, how many of the axioms, how many of the assumed truths that I'm working under are really perhaps themselves not true? And whether I should reevaluate those axioms themselves. Any other thoughts on this? Okay. This one. Okay. It's not a video.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I shouldn't say watch. I should have said listen. It was all audio, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, back and forth in a civilized discussion, talking about how you can't have religion without science and science without religion. And halfway through, Ben Carson, I think he brought up of the unknown, how we can prove some things, but why we can't prove others. And Richard Dawkins said that religion is also like a science, a hypothesis, and which was this interesting part of the discussion led to where does the thought originate, which no one can. Ben Carson talked about how the nerves and scientific reasoning, but we don't have any proof or knowledge of where thought originates.
Mm-hmm. Very, very nicely done. Usually, a nice synopsis of it. One part, again, that I keep on looking at and thinking they've all missed, and that is either there's a great intelligence out there or there isn't. I'm sorry, you haven't figured out what intelligence is. we can't answer that one particularly well.
We can't figure out what's something that's a greater intelligence than us. We can't figure it out.
Of course, Dawkins' response is ascribing it to some greater intelligence doesn't solve anything. We have to define that and figure out how it happened. That's his argument. But what I liked about this is that you have 4 really sharp people up there, and they're all highly educated. They know how to express themselves. Got to admit that Carson fumbles a great deal in his language and grammar. Dawkins never does. Dennett was pretty good. Collins was very good too. But it's nice to hear people who really know how to speak. And in fact, many of them have been in front of audiences so many times, they really become very facile with words and have developed a mastery of oratory. Worth listening to just for the language itself, and also just full of all kinds of ideas and things to think about. Any other thoughts? I'm sure the rest of you had all kinds of fascinating things running through your heads when you're watching. Okay, we will skip this and leave it on the agenda for next time. Let's discuss Twelfth Night, and now here are the updated assignments. I threw this one in. He is one of the best, I think, journalists, and certainly one of the greatest award-winning journalist. And he is an academic. He did his PhD in Trinity College Dublin, and then has received another dozen or so honorary doctorates of one sort or another. He expresses himself beautifully. And so Robert Fisk, let's go ahead and listen to him talking about journalism and what journalism should be. How many of you have already watched that?
I watched that.
Very good, very good.
Part of it.
Fantastic.
Good. Any other thoughts on it?
It was really cool to see his opinion and how much journalism has been dumbed down now, and it's like pandering to the lowest denominator. And it's kind of like just more of following celebrities than actual news. And I thought that was cool how he just exposed media nowadays for what it is.
Very good.
Also, the media follows where the money is as well.
Yeah, it basically where the biggest trend is, or whatever is going to get the most views or clicks.
Yeah. Just a little point. Cool. The word "cool" is used so often in usual parlance, but it lowers the tone a little bit when you use it. Dates back to the 20s, I believe, and which it was introduced. And I've heard that it's introduced from African dialect, Yoruba dialect, and had rather different meaning there. But it's not a word I use comfortably, and so
You're so cool. Says that anymore.
Think about what is cool. Think about all of the wonderful things.
Everybody says chill now. You're so chill. I'm so chill.
Yeah.
Oh, good
I'm
grief.
just in my house chilling.
There's a correlation between something being cold and being
Frisson, or there are just so many other words that could be used there.
Or even worse, sick.
I'm sorry?
sick. Yeah,
Sick is probably even worse.
Sick.
yeah. Some people say if something's
Yeah.
sick, that means it's
Oh,
good.
that's so sick.
Yeah.
Good grief. I remember when I was in high school, people started using the word "bad" in that
You're
context.
so bad, man. You're bad. I'm bad with you. Let's both be bad.
I tell you what, let's look up a little bit and see if you can't find some wonderful words which actually elevate the level of your language by describing them. Remarkable, superb.
No.
You don't like those.
It's not
okay.
cutting it like chill, bad, cool, sweet.
Um,
Those words, they come from the heart.
No.
I
This is
think
very well
they're just
put,
more
very well put.
socially acceptable words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think you could probably find some really good ones. They certainly do exist. Okay. Let's jump in. Oh, by the way, I've given you this one here. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a little out of date now. This was done just before the last election.
Mhm.
Anybody watch it?
I watched the beginning, like at least 25 minutes, and from what I could tell, it was basically a liberal and a conservative arguing with each other, and their views on like government and stuff like that.
Like government?
Oh, their views on government and stuff related to that.
Yes, very good. Yeah. Both of them, however, use absolutely flawless language. And if for no other reason, it's worth watching for that. Also for the fact that it is balanced. You get both sides of the page.
Yeah.
Okay. 12th Night. Let's go off into 12th Night. Do I have this up here somewhere?
I doubt it.
I thought I did. There we are. Okay. This is on 12th Night page, and it's got all kinds of stuff. This is an ancient one with Obi-Wan Kenobi up there. Alec Guinness, the one who played it in the initial film.
Obi-Wan
Didn't know that.
Kenobi.
And one of the other knights as Sir Toby Belch. The four knights of the British stage. We have two of them in this version. Okay, and then the Kenneth Branagh version is a very nice one, an interesting one. Go ahead and watch that one if you haven't had a chance. It works nicely. But first of all, we have to ask ourselves, where is this set? Where does it take place?
England?
No.
It takes place along the what's called the Adriatic.
Very good, very good. Where's the Adriatic? Okay. You know that boot that is Italy?
Mhm.
Adriatic is the sea just to that side of it, to the right of it.
Okay.
So you cross the sea from Italy and you reach, well, we call it the Balkans, or you might once have called it Yugoslavia. Now it's Croatia or Serbia, depending on where you land. And that's where Illyria was. Yes, thank you. Very good. Which doesn't make an awful lot of sense. You're going to put snow on the ground because they have the same climate we have. Now, granted, it's in winter. 12th Night takes place on 12th Night, which is the 12th night of the Epiphany. So it does take place in winter, but snow doesn't really make a lot of sense there, I don't think. Still, the plot itself. Now, some of you are experts on the plot, and of course, I've got. Oh my goodness, I've actually got an old-fashioned multiple choice test here, and quotes to identify. Let's do a little synopsizing here. Dawson, you're an expert. What's going on in this play?
Well, there are these two twins, and one of them's a girl, one of them's a boy.
Okay, for twins.
Yeah. And there's a shipwreck, and both of them think that the other one's dead. Each one of them, I think, enters the service. One of them enters in the service of a lord, and the other one enters the service of a lady, I believe.
Oh, sort of. Yes, ends up with.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and they
Does anybody
basically
want
switch
to
gender roles, I think.
expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay,
It's been a
yeah,
while.
we've got a number of things taking place, as is the case with most of Shakespeare's plays. We have a number of different plays taking place, or a number of different little combinations which tend to weave together. It's a beautiful way that he had of combining things. Let's look at the characters. In fact, I think somewhere I found a character map of Twelfth Night, which is useful. In Illyria, the person who rules Illyria is the Duke Orsino. And what is Orsino like? He is noble. Certainly everyone recognizes that. Indeed, even the sea captain who helps Viola when she first is shipwrecked and describes the Duke who rules there. But he's a bit weird in one way. What is that? What is strange about him? He's in love. Not just in love. He's not really in love with the lady, although I suppose he is. He is in love with being in love. And
He loves the feeling.
He loves the feeling, and he spends more time talking about his state of mind than he does talking about the person he's in love with, which is an interesting point. And of course, it has that very famous line at the beginning, if music be the food of love, play on, give me excess of it. He's, in a way, he wants to be free of being in love. He wants to wash it away by having the music play itself out, so to speak. But no, he keeps on sending emissaries to the lady he's in love with. Whom is he in love with? Okay.
I can't really remember her name.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go through the names. And I'm sorry, I should have a chart of the names up here. Brian's writing them down as we go along, so he can explain it all to us. Okay, we've got the two twins are Viola and Sebastian. And the important thing about these two twins, who are both shipwrecked, separated, is that they are educated. They come from a noble family. And Viola knows it. She knows that, what am I to do here in Illyria? Well, who's the noble who runs Illyria? I'll go to him, because I can speak to him in many kinds of languages that he will know and appreciate. She's educated. This is a very important aspect of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. We have a girl who, she knows her mind, she knows how to write poetry, she knows how to state a case and persuade an audience, and she knows it. Okay. Then we have the Duke Orsino, and the Duke Orsino is in love with the Lady Olivia, also a denizen of this area. And this is really pretty much the whole plot. We've got the Duke and the Lady Olivia, and we've got the Lady Olivia's retinue, and she has a household. And within that household, she's got a number of peculiar and interesting people. She's got her steward, whose name is Malvolio. And she has her chambermaid, whose name is Mariah. And she has her uncle, whose name is Sir Toby Belch. And Sir Toby Belch has a friend, also a knight, Sir Andrew Aguecheek, whom actually Sir Toby is exploiting. Aguecheek has some money, and Sir Toby is trying to persuade Aguecheek to woo the Lady Olivia and try to marry her and get her fortune. But in the process, of course, Aguecheek is paying for all of the money, all of the drinks and excesses to which Toby is devoted. But he's with the Lady Olivia consanguineous. What does that mean?
Cut a word.
They're related. they're of the same blood. The reason that popped to mind is when I was watching the program on the doctor. What's his name?
Carson?
Carson, yes. They used the word exsanguinate. And exsanguinate means to die for loss of blood. Well, it's cognate, therefore, of consanguineous, to be of the same blood. Okay, so Viola asks, well, maybe I can go and work for this lady, Lady Olivia. And this is when she first arrives, and the captain who saves her explains, no, the Lady Olivia doesn't want to talk to anybody. She's in mourning. Her father has died, putting her in the care of her brother, who then also died. And so she's dressed in black and not seeing anybody, and certainly not going out and dating with the Duke Orsino. And she's constantly receiving these overtures from the Duke Orsino as he sends messages to her and servants to deliver messages, and she won't have anything to do with it. And so Viola decides, okay, well, if I can't work for the lady, which would be the ideal way to go, I work for the man. But the trouble is I can't go as a lady and work for the man. So what does she do? She dresses up as a guy. And so she dresses up and she emulates her brother in the way he dressed and his ornament and with everything about the way she dresses is just like the way her brother dressed. And she goes and immediately her talents are recognized, and the Duke Orsino gives her a task. And what does he ask her to do? You know what it is. Go and woo the Lady Olivia for me. Take my messages to the Lady Olivia. Now, what's Viola doing through this? Well, Viola's a lady and an intelligent one. And she almost instantly falls in love with the Duke Orsino herself. And then she's given this task of going off to help him woo the Lady Olivia. But indeed, she is so devoted to him, she's do everything she can to go and try to win the Lady Olivia for him. And she does. She goes there, and of course, we meet the rather stodgy and old-fashioned and perhaps dictatorial steward named Malvolio. And she manages to get an audience with the Lady Olivia. And this is a marvelous scene, which we should probably look at and go through as she is talking with the Lady Olivia. And very rapidly, almost instantaneously, the Lady Olivia falls in love with the emissary. Viola has given herself another name. She's calling herself Cesario. And so as Cesario, she is an emissary from the Duke to the Lady Olivia, who then falls in love with Cesario. And she's confused by this. She doesn't know what to do with it. The Lady Olivia pulls a con on her. It's a very common con, probably hasn't happened to you folks yet, maybe it has. The lady you talk to wants to make sure to renew the relationship in the future, so leaves a scarf in your trunk or leaves something in your car so that she has an excuse to come back. And indeed, of course, this is what the Lady Olivia does. She takes a ring and she sends it after him, telling Malvolio, whom she sends, that he gave me this ring, and take it back to him and say I'll have none of it. But she didn't give him anything. And so, but it requires Cesario to follow up on it somehow. And so she uses this device. Now, perhaps one of the most important characters of the whole thing is Feste. Feste is a jester. not necessarily anybody particular's jester, because he's been clearly in both of these great houses, and they all appreciate him. He sings songs for the Duke. He jests for the Lady Olivia. He's made fun of by Malvolio. And he hangs around with Sir Toby and Sir Andrew Aguecheek, and they drink and sing at night. So here we have another little bit of the plot going around. Sir Toby and Sir Andrew are singing and drinking, and Feste is there. They're making a bit of noise, and Malvolio comes in, having been woken up. And he lays the law down and threatens them and so forth. And so we have another plot developing there. Okay, have I given you too much here? Okay. So we have wonderful things happening there. We've got another little dynamic happening, and that is Mariah. She is the Lady Olivia's serving lady, her mate, and she is in love with Sir Toby. And we do know this. We know this partly because Feste knows everything, and he lets it drop. Feste is sort of the omniscient eye behind the whole thing. He sees what's going on, doesn't see everything quite, but he gives us our perspective on the entire picture. Okay, so we've got the household disliking Malvolio. Now we've got another interesting dynamic here. I don't know whether these quotes are in order. I'm tempted. Oh, wonderful stuff here. Let's look at these quotes and just put them in order. We've got another dynamic, and that, of course, is Viola and the Duke Orsino. She is pretending to be a man. She's in love with him. He's in love with the dream. He's in love with being in love. And they get talking about love in the abstract. And we have such absolutely wonderful language used there. And I hear, that's not it. Let's see if I have that part excerpted here. Oh yes, okay. And she is talking to him, and in a very misogynistic, old-fashioned way. What does misogynistic mean? Hatred of females. Write it down. These are some important words. Misogynistic. The Duke Orsino is explaining to Viola that no woman could possibly love as much as he is in love. And she is trying to explain to him that, no, that's not quite the case. But she can't explain why, because she's still pretending to be a man. Okay, and so she starts by telling him a story. She says, my father had a daughter, loved a man, as it might be perhaps were I a woman, I should your lordship. And then he says, what is her history? What became of that? Did she never told her love, but let concealment, like a worm in the bud, feed on her damask cheek. She pined in thought, and with a green and yellow melancholy, she sat like patience on a monument, smiling at grief. But died thy sister of her love, my boy? I am all the daughters of my father's house, and all the brothers too, and yet I know not. There's so much in that. There's so much in that language. What is she saying? And she's saying it so cleverly that she's not really revealing what's going on. When she says, my father had a daughter, loved a man, of course, she's talking about herself, but she's telling an absolute truth. My father had a daughter, but she's not saying that she's the daughter because she's pretending to be a man. And she said she never told her love, and she just remained quiet about it. But did she die of her love? And the answer was, I am all the daughters of my father's house, and all the brothers too, and yet I know not. And of course, she doesn't. This again is true. She thinks her brother is dead. And there again, we see that sort of grief that comes through this thing. I feel like bringing up the whole play, but that might be too much. Let's go back and look at some of this. So this is a wonderful dynamic there between the characters. And then, of course, Viola does go back. She is sent back to try again with the Lady Olivia. And the Lady Olivia apologizes in a way, and then she is so taken by Viola. Why is she taken by Viola? Viola is brilliant. She's educated. She's inspired. She's poetic. She knows how to wield words, and that's a wonderful example in this. So then the Lady Olivia breaks down and admits that she's in love with her, and Viola explains that she cannot be. However, something else is going on there. Sir Toby is always ready to cause trouble. Sir Toby is already causing trouble for Andrew, and Sir Toby and Maria, and Andrew and Feste, for that matter, all of them decide, okay, well, let's do something to Malvolio. So what is Malvolio all about? He is stodgy, he is self-important, he is ambitious. Indeed, he would love to marry the Lady Olivia himself, but he's just a steward. But there's precedent for it. There's precedent for gapping those societal stratified classes. And in fact, we do see it happen, because eventually Sir Toby does marry Maria, which does the same kind of thing. But Maria sees this, and she realizes we can get him. And they get him by the fact that she knows she can write very much like the Lady Olivia, and they can't even tell their handwriting apart if they've forgotten who wrote it. And so she writes a letter, a peculiar, confusing letter, which she drops where Malvolio will find it. And the letter makes Malvolio think that the Lady Olivia is actually in love with him, and gives him this idea that maybe he can achieve things. Among other things, it says weird things in there like, it's wonderful the way you wore yellow socks, and cross-gartered, which was a style at the time of gartering around the socks. And so there's a very famous scene in this in which Malvolio comes in to the Lady Olivia wearing yellow socks and cross-gartered, and he's just taking on all of the aspects that have been imposed on him by this letter. And it's a wonderful scene. Recently, I would love, in fact, to be able to bring it down, but it's not, as far as I know, online anywhere. I bought the DVD. This Twelfth Night was put on in the Globe Theatre in London 2 years ago. And they did a completely authentic presentation of it, down to the buttons on the costumes and the scenery and everything in this. They did it exactly the way it was done in Shakespeare's time. And I have a DVD of that. It's a fascinating thing. And it was all played by men. They didn't have women on the stage at the time, so men play all the roles. And the Lady Olivia is played by Mark Ryland, who's the major Shakespearean stage actor whom nobody's really heard of because not that many people see Shakespeare on the stage in London. But Malvolio is played by Stephen Fry. And it's fascinating. That scene is out on YouTube. Now see if I can find that for you. Any questions here? I can see by your attitudes and postures that we have reached the end of class here. Any questions? Do you have enough homework?
Yes.
There seems to be unanimity on that point. Okay. I'm not sure you have enough for 2 weeks.
Oh yeah.
Oh, two?
And I'm not sure that I can resist giving you more. So we'll see what happens. Okay, next week we won't meet here. Well, we're not going to meet online either. Right? We're all going to be
Somewhere eating.
in a postprandial stupor. What does that mean?
Sleep.
Prandial has to do with having a meal.
Oh,
We're all going to
sleep
be.
from all the dinners and
We're
everything.
going.
Exactly.
We're all going to be in a different state.
Different states of recovering from excess. Okay, I have 2 Thanksgiving dinners to go to next Thursday. So.
And school, not this.
Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday this coming
You
week,
too.
and we will meet in 2 weeks. And go ahead and keep posting things. And I'm afraid I will probably augment our assignments somewhat.
Okay.
And we'll have the full text of Twelfth Night next week.
Whoa.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, let's roll an end to our college prepping was passed for homeschoolers at EIE.